Hey, yo, welcome everyone. Um, so I've decided to make this video about the best Gunlances in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate because, well, I just really like Monster Hunter and especially 4 Ultimate. I've been playing these games for a long ass time and I've always been maining Gunlance in every single one of them. And since 4 Ultimate has always been the one that I played the most and I crafted every single one of these Gunlances in my game file for real. Yes, I am a bit insane. I thought I'd just rank them right here and now, so to see, like, in terms of overall how they perform, how many monsters they can completely destroy or not. And just keep in mind that this isn't like a really thorough ranking. I haven't sat here and done the math on every single monster for every single weapon. I'm not quite that insane yet, but it's a bit like following what I think. It's not super objective or anything. So with that said, let's get right to it. So we have a tier here which is stuck at high rank. There's one Gunlance, which is this one, the Feline Gunlance with paralysis. It doesn't upgrade past high rank, so it just stuck at like a rare 5 state, so you know. Obviously it can't compete with any of the other Gunlances, it just doesn't have the stats. We won't be ranking relics obviously, because you know, they're random. You can get relics that are way better than any of the craftable Gunlances, but that's, again, it's dumb luck, so can't really rank all the possibilities there. So with this out of the way, this is kind of its own tier. It's the only Gunlance that gets stuck at high rank. Every other Gunlance is a G rank upgrade. We can start ranking them. So starting off, we have the Cantor Gunlance. I guess we'll go in order for how they are here. This one is, as usual with most Cantor weapons, it has really impressive stats on paper, but then you look at the sharpness and it's rough. You need sharpness +1 to make it even get to blue, and even then blue is not super good. You could make an argument that it has like some usefulness against like Rajang, where you don't really bounce ever, but even then the huge raw and affinity don't benefit Gunlance that much. I think it's normal 5 shelling, and the bad thing about Gunlance is that the shelling doesn't scale with your raw, so having more raw doesn't make you do more damage with the shells, which would be great. In this case, the Cantor Gunlance could seriously have like some really powerful shelling, but it doesn't because that's not how it works. So unfortunately, I think it's completely outclassed by better options across the board. So we'll see. The better options will mostly be in the best overall tier. This tier is kind of like, yeah, sure, you can use this Gunlance. It's not super bad. It's like on par or almost on par with this tier, but you know, this is kind of reserved for those Gunlances which share the same element, but one of them has like better stats than the other in some areas, so you want to pick one over the other. But maybe it has more element, maybe you want more element, you know, there's an argument to be made, but for a Cantor Gunlance, I don't think there is. You shouldn't use this one. So next up we have the Darren Gunlance, which is a water elemental Gunlance. If I recall, it doesn't really have that much raw. We'll be using the true raw values. If you don't know about true raw, it's basically the values displayed in the game are kind of bloated by a constant factor depending on your weapon type, and the true attack, you just divide by that and you find out what it is. I think true attack is better for comparing weapons and, you know, comparing even across weapon types. But here it is. Duran Gunlance has 260 raw with 33 water element. It has 30% affinity, that's kind of nice. It gets purple, but again, Gunlance chews through sharpness a lot, so even if it has like 30 hits of purple, it's not a lot. But it's something, like you take what you can get in 4U. There aren't that many Gunlances that have a long purple in this game. Overall, I'd say this one has a niche. Like, it's at water elemental Gunlance, it's normal 5, so you know, shelling is maxed level. Normal isn't my favorite type, but it does have the strongest full burst. So there's that. And overall, normal is quite good for element because you get to really go on long poke shell combos. You can just poke shell 5 times over if you have the opening for that. So you can stack element quite effectively on normal Gunlances. Unfortunately, I just think this one gets held back by its raw like a lot, and I think there are better water Gunlances in the game. We could do something akin to ranking all of the water element GLs right here if I can find them. So there's Plesioth, this one is also water element, and Celtis is also water element. I don't remember if there are any more. So Sea Abyss is the Plesioth one. I have Tyrannica open here on my phone, just checking. Apparently the Zamtr's Gunlance is water. I thought it was ice, but no, this is water as well. And I think those are all the water Gunlances in the game, yeah. So the highest element GL for water is Zamtrius, but it also has the lowest raw, and it only gets wide force shelling, so again, element is good. I would say this also goes in, has a niche, but overall it's kind of meh. Again, it has even lower raw than Darren, and it doesn't have positive affinity, so sure, the element is good, but you should really trade as much raw as you're gaining element, because like Darren has to 60 raw, Zamtruth has to 40 raw, so they are 20 raw apart, and they are 20 element apart exactly. And usually you want to favor raw even if you're going for an element build, so gets kind of outclassed by Darren. But again, if you're going for just full element stacking, I guess this has a niche overall. Plesioth Gunlance is a long level 4, it's kind of the middle of them, it has exactly 250 raw, which is in between them, and 43 water, which is also in between them, by 10 of both. This one does also have a bit of positive affinity, is plus 10%, so again, these three Gunlances are so close, like especially Plesioth and Darren are so close in terms of effectiveness. I guess Darren is a little bit better because it has the highest raw and the highest affinity, and you don't lose much in terms of element for it. But I would say that overall the best water Gunlance in the game is undoubtedly the Celtis one. It has way better raw than all of them. It's at 280 raw, which is pretty good for elemental GL. Gets 38 water, long level 5, which is 3 shells, so you can still poke shell quite a lot. It's hard to get an opening to do all 5 reps of poke shell on normal, so even if you're going on a long, you're still gonna be doing quite a lot. Like, you're still gonna be doing your 3 reps, and then mostly you'll have to get out of the way or dodge something. Hell, you'll have to do that before 3 reps usually, but yeah. I haven't been considering slots a lot, but this Celtis Gunlance has 2 slots, which is pretty good. Most weapons slots aren't super important, but you know, 2 slots can make a difference. They can give you 3 points in Challenger or whatever, so it's pretty good. I don't think any of the other Gunlances have 3 slots in here. Plesioth and Darren only have 1 slot, and Zamtruth has no slots, so yeah. I think Celtis really wins. All these Gunlances get purple with sharpness +1, so again, the sharpness is very important. Celtis does have the smallest purple out of all of them, but it's still like, you're gonna be using a razor sharp on Gunlance because it helps a lot in cutting the shelling sharpness loss, which is twice as much as just melee hits. So you consume 2 units of sharpness per shell, and razor sharp cuts that to 1. Wide shells are even more advantage in this because they consume 3 units of sharpness, which gets cut down to 1 because of the rounding on razor sharp. So, but yeah, I think Gunlance is just gonna use razor sharp no matter what because it just helps a lot. So even if it has the smallest purple, the damage and the element is better than Darren. Damage is probably better than Darren when you make the calculations for all the EFR, considering the 30% affinity. But I'd say overall these two are kind of close together. They're way better than Plesioth and Zomtrius, so I'd say they're good in the right matchups, both of them. Actually, yeah. Next up we have Gogmazias. Gogmazias Gunlances. It's okay. It's a sleep Gunlance. It's not the best status to have. Sleep, you'd think you can, you know, sleep and then wake up with Wyvern's Fire. We'll put it here for now. But Wyvern's Fire doesn't actually get boosted by the sleep wake up bonus because it's like 4 hits. Unfortunately, it doesn't like do damage in one big hit, but it does damage in 4 smaller hits, of which only 1 gets the bonus. So it's still alright. It's still quite a chunk of damage, but it's not as good as it could be. And sleep Gunlances in general, if you're soloing, aren't really worth pursuing. If you're in a group, then this is a pretty decent Gunlance. It has good raw, at 300 true raw. That's quite good for ultimate standards. It does have negative affinity, but it's only 10%. You won't really. It does drop your EFR a little bit, but it's not too much of a decrease. I think it's still going to be around 290 or something. I guess we'll compare it to the other sleep Gunlances in the game, which are Hypnocatris. I don't know how to pronounce monster names, by the way. I'm sorry if I'm butchering shit. So here's Nursilla. Nursilla is also, or Nurskilla. Again, I don't know. I usually just say Nursilla. This one is a sleep Gunlance, and then Hypno. If I can find out which one it is here. Here it is. So these 3 are the only 3 sleep Gunlances in the game. The one with the most sleep is Hypno, but it's stuck at white sharpness, even with sharpness +1, so that's kind of unfortunate. I'd say this one as... we'll put Zamtr's Gel actually completely outclassed, because it has lowest raw, and even if it has highest element, it doesn't really matter too much when it's just by 10 true element. So we were saying Hypnos. Hypnos is the name of the Gunlance here. The Hypnocatris Gunlance has 45 sleep, which is quite high. 240 true raw isn't a lot, but it does have 3 slots. But it only gets white sharpness. I think overall this is the weakest of the sleep Gunlances. Usually you don't really get more than 1 or 2 sleeps per hunt anyways, so you just need a decent amount of it. You don't really need a lot. Like, the amount of sleep you have only makes a difference if you get 1 more proc during a hunt. If you get the same number of procs during a hunt, it's making no difference. So again, I haven't done the math, but I don't think getting more status overall is that valuable to sleep weapons. And Nursilla Gunlance has purple. It has 32 sleep, which is still quite a lot. 230 raw, which is actually lower than Hypnocatris, but with purple it does get bumped to a higher overall EFR, and it does have a whopping 40% affinity, which is quite a lot. Still don't think it reaches the same damage as Gogma, because Gogma does have some of the better raw in the game. At 300, I'd say both of them have a niche, but overall, if I'm using a sleep weapon, I'm mostly worried about just doing damage, so I would pick Gogma over any of them. It does have only a sliver of purple, it's 10 hits, so you'll be at white for a lot of it. I'd say both of them have a niche, but overall they don't really shine. Sleep Gunlances, again, I don't think are a super good option to go for if you're playing solo. If you're in a group, they're fine, but also there are better weapons at applying sleep that also capitalize on it better. Anyway, we have the Bamboo Gunlance here. This is the only, I think, event Gunlance that you need to do a specific event to unlock. This one is a complete meme. It's not stuck at high rank, because it does have a rare 8 upgrade, but it's just really bad, so I put it in completely outclassed by better options. I want to bump this up, actually, because if it does get you 1 more sleep proc, I guess it has a niche. All 3 of these Gunlances, I'd say sleep has its own niche. If you want to do sleep Gunlancing, you know, you can do it. But neither of these 3 Gunlances are like winning matchups faster than the actually elemental or raw Gunlances that dominate. So Bamboo Gunlance, stats are kind of ass. It gets blue sharpness at best. It does have 3 slots, but it has no raw, no element, unless you use Awakening, which you generally don't on Gunlance because it's a skill-hungry weapon, and you need to be having Razor Sharp, you need to be having Sharpness +1, you need to be having either Evasion or Guard to just, you know, tank effectively. And if you're shelling, you need to be having Artillery, of course. Doesn't even have max shelling level. This Gunlance is just here as a joke weapon, basically. Next up, we have Gravios Gunlance. This one is the Black Gore Buster, I think. Yeah. So 290 true raw, that's quite alright, but unfortunately it's stuck at white sharpness. Minus 5% affinity, which is basically might as well not be there, but you know, it does drop your EFR a little bit. I'd consider this overall just a worse Gogmazius Gunlance, so I'd say it's completely outclassed by better options. It doesn't have any element, unless you use Awaken, which I'm not going to consider, because it's really hard to fit Awaken in a Gunlance set, and you shouldn't really go for it. At least I don't really go for it. If you want, sure, but this is my list. And just the Gogmazius Gunlance, even if it's not the best raw Gunlance, it's just better. Has more raw. The affinity difference is only 5%, so EFR I'd say is still higher on Gogma. It has Sleep, which you don't need Awaken for. It has a little bit of purple, and basically the same white as Gravios. And they're both long level 5 shelling, so... No, wait. Gogmazius is normal 5, but again, I don't really care too much about the shelling type, I just care that it's level 5, because that's the highest damage you can have on shells. I don't think long is necessarily better than normal in and of itself. I think it depends on your playstyle. So we'll mostly keep them independent of shelling type. Next up is Kezu Gunlance. So I guess it's time to do the Thunder Element GLs. Put them in this tier. So we have Rajang, we have Zinogre, and we have Abyssal Laggy. I think these are all the Thunder Gunlances. I don't know if White Fatalis is Dragon or Thunder in this. I'm just gonna check. White Fatalis is indeed a Dragon Gunlance, so as far as Thunder goes, it's only Zinogre, Abyssal, and Kezu. Yeah. And Rajang, of course. Actually, is Rajang a Thunder Element Gunlance? I'm not sure. I'm checking Kiranica real quick. Yeah, it does have Thunder, okay. So these three we have. The first one is Kezu, which has the highest Thunder Element at 65 True Thunder. It's quite a lot. It's probably some of the highest element you see on Gunlances. 250 raw, but it only gets white sharpness, which means unfortunately sharpness does affect both your raw damage multiplier and elemental damage multiplier, and white isn't as good as purple as for element. So I think this one might be completely outclassed by better options. The raw isn't that good, it's at 250. And it doesn't really have much else going for it. No affinity, and it has one slot, which doesn't usually make too much of a difference, and it's only long level 4 shelling, so it's not even as damaging as it could be. So next up we have Rajang Gunlance. This one is a wide level 5, so it does have max level shelling, which is nice. But 40 Thunder is quite a lot. Sharpness isn't the greatest, but it does have purple, like 20 hits. 280 raw with minus 10% affinity is a little bit on the low end. So unfortunately this Gunlance doesn't have the raw to back it up. Overall, the rest of the stats are quite decent though, so I guess this one does have a niche. With Zinogre Gunlance, it's kind of the same deal. It has very little purple, even less than Rajang. That's 10 hits of purple in it. 270 Raw, which is less than Rajang, 30 Thunder, which is less than Rajang. I guess the negative affinity on Rajang can put the EFR of Zinogre a little bit higher, but I'd say with the better sharpness that Rajang got and better element, I'd say that Zinogre is just completely outclassed by it. And then we have the Abyssal Laggy Gunlance. This one has 270 Raw with very long purple. This is one of the better purples in the games for Gunlance. 48 Thunder, which is also a lot. It's probably kind of on par with Kezu in terms of element because of the purple sharpness element multiplier, and I think this is the Thunder Gunlance you want to go for if you're going for a Thunder weak monster in your matchup. This is probably the best one you can pick. Level 5 Shelling as well. These two are level 4. Rajang is wide level 5 and Abyssal is long and level 5 as well. So these are the Thunder element Gunlances. Next up we have Deora, so I guess it's time to do the Ice element. So we have Lagambi. I guess we have Rusted Deora. I guess that is technically an Ice element Gunlance. And then we have Yukanlos, I suppose, even though it's not really an ice weapon as much as it is a raw weapon. We'll put them together. So, yep, that's all the ice Gunlances in the game. Starting off with Lagambi, it's a level 4 Shelling Gunlance on white sharpness on 230 raw. I think, unfortunately, this one is just completely outclassed by better options. It does have good element, but it's not even as good as Kezu. It's 48 ice. Well, Kezujial at least at 65, and even if it was stuck at white sharpness. Just overall not very good. Deora Gunlance. This one is probably the better Ice Gunlance in the game. Overall, the Ice Gunlances aren't super good in this game. Deora is kind of crippled by low raw. It has only 260 with no affinity. It does have quite huge ice element at 59, and it does get purple sharpness about 20 or 30 hits. So you can make good use of that element. I think if you want to exploit ice elemental weakness, this is the best Gunlance to do it. Does have normal 5, which again leads to the longest poke shell combos. After that we have Rusted Kushala, which is just Rusted Kushala weapons in this game. What were they thinking actually? They do have decent raw at 300, but every single Rusted Kushala weapon in this game has the same problem of having ridiculously bad affinity. This one is at minus 40%, which is just such a massive hit to its EFR. And another major flaw they have is that they have like 10 hits of purple and then 20 hits of white, and then it's blue all the way down. So pretty much every single Rusted Kushala weapon in the game sucks, except for like the light bowgun, because elemental shots don't scale on affinity, so you just make use of the high raw. But yeah, aside from that, Rusted Kushala weapons are just completely outclassed by better options. Yukanlos Gunlance, I guess it's ice. It has like 12 ice element, which is nothing. Does have extremely high raw. This is the highest raw Gunlance in terms of just the display number at 360, but minus 30% affinity is also quite a lot to be dealing with. Does have long level 5 shelling, so you know. Again, it doesn't scale with raw, so it's on par with every other long 5 shelling damage. It does get white sharpness at least, while Acantor is only stacked at blue, but I'd say Yukanlos and Acantor weapons are kind of just in the same tier of being very, very polarized weapons that prioritize raw and very little else. Although you can use them for just shelling, they do have level 5, so if you're not gonna be milling with them, they can be on par with everything else in terms of shelling, but at that point you don't even look at the stats. Next up is the Obelisk, which at this point it's time to look at the Dragon Gunlances. So Obelisk, there's like the 2 Fatalis Gunlances that have Dragon element, Stygian as well. There's Fatalis. There's probably something else that has dragon. This game has so many dragon weapons. Yeah, there's Chaos Gore and Shagaru, which is here. All of these are dragon. I don't know if there's anything else. I don't know if Devil Joe gets dragon element on its Gunlance. I don't think he does, but maybe. No, he doesn't. It's Awaken, which might as well not be there. So, okay. So starting from the Obelisk, this one has the highest element of any Gunlance at 76 dragon. So it's quite a number. Unfortunately, it only gets white sharpness, so it doesn't get the highest multiplier it could have for that element. And the raw is extremely poor at 230. I think this one looks good on the surface because of the stupid element, but I think that Black Fatalis Gunlance is just better. It does have... Black Fatalis also has a ton of element. It has 62 dragon, and it does get purple, at least 30 hits, which is pretty decent. It has 270 raw, which is way more than the Obelisk. And it does have level 5 shelling as well, while the Obelisk only stops at level 4. So I'd say overall the Obelisk is completely outclassed by Fatalis, and Fatalis is probably good in the right matchup. It has a fuck ton of dragon, man. I don't know which matchups you'd want to use it on. I haven't like sat there and looked at the elemental hit zones, but I know there's like Gogmazius at least takes 1 billion dragon damage on second phase, and so does Fatalis on his head, so this one has the potential to do some real ass damage to those monsters. White Fatalis is kind of a different deal. It has a lot lower element than Black Fatalis and only 10 more raw. It does have better purple sharpness, that's gotta be at least 50 hits, but I don't know, the element difference is so huge. They have like 30 element in difference, which is a lot considering it only has 10 raw over Fatalis. So overall, I'd say that White Fatalis has a niche if you want more raw over the element of black, but if you're doing raw Gunlance, there's better options to pick than White Fatalis. Stygian Gunlance, it's kind of in the same situation as White Fatalis. It also has like 37 raw, White Fatalis at 36, so they're basically the same element. I've said 37 element, sorry. The raw is the same at 280 for both. They're basically the same Gunlance, except they probably have a different shelling type. So White Fatalis is long 5, and Stygian is wide level 4, so it's not even max level. So I'd say that just on the basis that it has lower shelling level, it's probably just completely outclassed by White Fatalis, which is also not as good of a dragon Gunlance as just regular Fatalis. There's the Chaos Gore Gunlance, which I guess we're gonna put in good in the right matchup, because if you're fighting a frenzy monster, these weapons are fucking insane. They get 1 billion affinity. The element is not really a factor, it only has like 14 dragon, which is nothing. But once you overcome the virus, it becomes a 55% affinity, 310 raw monster. Even then, I'm not sure if it's like worth going for. I don't really see people online use Chaos Gore weapons a lot, even when you're fighting Frenzy or Apex monsters. Because this one does only have level 4 shelling, unfortunately. But I feel like they are made for that matchup, so they are kind of good in that. Even if it takes overcoming the virus to get the full benefits. Actually, I might put this in has a niche, because, again, you're gonna be playing on minus 40% affinity anyways, even if you are in the right situation to make use of it. Because you're gonna have to overcome the virus before you get the affinity bump. And that does suck quite a bit. Last but not least, we have the Shagaru Gunlance, which has 55% affinity naturally. This is probably the highest affinity weapon in the game, I think. It does have good purple, that's like 50 or 40 hits of it. 50 dragon, which is quite a bit of element. The only bad part of this Gunlance is that the raw is just very, very low. It has 240 true raw. But I'd say overall, the affinity it has is just ridiculous. If crit boost wasn't this game, this probably would be the best Dragon Gunlance overall. but a 240 raw with 55% affinity and 50 dragon element. This one, there's an argument to be made for it over Fatalis. It probably gets more EFR than regular Fatalis Gunlance. It also has better sharpness to work with because you don't get stuck at like 10 hits of white once you run out of purple. It does have very long white after you run out of purple. So I'd say these two are kind of on par in terms of the best dragon gunlances in the game. Again, dragon is indeed one of the better elements in the game because that does have really good matchups against Gog and Fatalis. They do have insane dragon hit zones, like 60 plus or something. So yeah, these two gunlances can make a lot of work. Devillager Gunlance. Devillager Gunlance is kind of weird because it's the one Gial in this game that basically doesn't want you to shell. It has extremely good raw at 300, no negative affinity, does get like 20 hits of purple. Doesn't have an element unless you use Awaken, which again we're discounting because you going for Awaken on Gial is kind of a waste. 300 raw gunlance with 20 hits of purple. It does have long level 3 shelling, which is level 3, that's really low. You basically don't shell with this, you treat it as a lance, basically, a proxy lance. So I'm not really sure why you would want to pick this, except if you want to just go for raw gunlancing and not shell ever, but even then I feel like there are better options to do that with that don't force you into level 3 shelling, so I'd say this one is completely outclassed by better options. Time to look at the fire gunlances, so let me put it on a tier that isn't completely occupied. So we have Metal Rats, we have Lunastra, and are there any other fire Gials in this game? There should be, right? There's no way there's only 2 fire weapons in a Monster Hunter game. No, there really are, okay. Every other fire weapon is Awakened, like the Gravias Gunlance. Okay, so of these two Gunlances, I'd say both are good in the right matchups. Metal Rats has good raw, 280, not excellent, but it's decent for the sharpness it has to it, that's like 30 hits of purple. 44 fire is again decent. It's pretty in line with the stats of Abyssal. It's a little bit better actually because it does have more raw and long level 5 shelling. It doesn't lose that much on element. So overall solid fire gunlance for matchups you want to use fire in against like a Gore Magala that's very weak to fire. And yeah, they're basically kind of close together in terms of how they are balanced. After that we have Luna's Sun, I think it's called. Yeah. This one does have lower raw at 250 and lower purple at like 20 hits, but it does have 72 fire, which is the second highest element of all fire gunlances. I'd say that overall you don't have ridiculous fire hit zones as you have Dragon, because Dragon hit zones in this game, again, Fatalis and Gog go crazy with those values. Fire doesn't get quite as high, so I'd say this one has a niche if you want more element than the Metal Rats one. But overall, it's not as good in general situations. You just go with Metal Rats. The raw is going to be more worth it, I think, in the long run. This one is still decent, though. Like, has its niche again. So, which one is this Gunlance? Hold on a second. What was this one called? I don't think this one was very noteworthy in anything. Okay, here it is. It's the Empire. And it's just an early G-rank Gunlance that you mostly use for climbing and not much else, so it's completely outclassed by better options. Doesn't really have anything going for it. 220 raw, which is very, very low. Wide 4 shelling, I guess. It has 3 slots in purple, but like, no, just no. Now it's time to rank the Blast Gunlances. So we have Crimson Fatalis, we have Brachydios, and pretty sure that's it. Again, we don't count Awaken, because I personally would never run Awaken on Gunlances with all the other skills I also need. So we only have these two. We have the Raging Brachydios one, which is a long level 5 at 270 raw with 46 blast and pretty good sharpness. That's like 50 hits of both purple and white. So I'd say this one has... again, blast is a very general thing that you use on everything, so this could have potential to being the best overall. 270 raw I think is still holding back quite a little, but 46 blast is quite a lot. And same could be said about Crimson Fatalis. It has 260 raw, but it does have 10% affinity, so that's a little bit more EFR than what's displayed. It's not, don't think it's still as high as Brachydios at 270, but they're close. Crimson Fatalis has 52 blast, which is even more. Sharpness is a little bit worse at like 30 hits of purple and 20 of white. So I'd say these two overall at... I don't want to say good in the right matchups, because it's not like there's a right matchup for blast. It's just blast. You use it on everything because it works. And it's just extra damage, kind of like poison. Doesn't really need to have a matchup to do its job. So I wouldn't consider these the best overall though, but I don't know, the blast damage does add up, so they have potential to be in here, I suppose. What I would consider in the best overall, unquestionably though, is indeed the Molten Tigrex Gunlance. This one is just really freaking good. It has 20% affinity, which is decent for your EFR. Let me see if I can find the rest of the stats. Okay. 280 raw, which is good. It has like 20 hits of purple, which is not a lot, but you know, it's there. And then it has quite long white as well. It has white level 5 shelling and 2 slots. I think overall this is like the best raw Gunlance in the game. Mostly gets carried by its decently high raw with positive affinity, which is not something you often see. All the 300 raw Gunlances don't really get that luxury. It's kind of close to the Metal Rats one, except instead of element it gets affinity, which is more generally just damage. It has Hidden Blast if you want to use Awaken, but again, if you're going to be using a Blast Gunlance, I think just Raging Brachy or Crimson Fatalis are better to go for, because you can fit more skills to just outclass the Blast than you would get on this with Awaken. But even then, these three Gunlances are probably the best for general matchups. So next up, I'd say this one is the very first base Gunlance maxed out, so the Imperial Sworn Lance, 260 raw, 15% affinity, Hidden Fire, which you're not really going to be using, and like 20 hits of purple. It's completely outclassed, I'd say, by the massively powerful Molten Tigrex Gunlance. It's only normal 4. All these three Gunlances are level 5 shelling. This one's wide, this one's long, this one's wide. After that we have the Corn Popper, which is another kind of joke weapon. For some reason it's a rare 9 Gunlance that only has 200 raw, so like nothing. I'd say this is completely outclassed by better options. It might even be outclassed by the freaking high rank Paralysis Gunlance. In terms of raw, no it's not. That one's at 130 raw. Poor little Gunlance. Berserk Tetsukabra Gunlance, okay. So this one is the Rampage Fire Belcher. It's 280 raw, minus 10% affinity, but it only gets white. Again, this goes into completely outclassed. Doesn't really have much going for it. Gold Rathian, okay, this one's actually kind of interesting. I guess we're doing the Poison Gunlances now, so Gold Rathian, I think this is Gypceros, and then Camilleus. So Goldrathian 45 poison, 270 raw, and decent purple and white at like 30 hits of purple and 50 of white. It's pretty good. Again, I'd say this one can stand in the best overall because poison is just more damage over time. It's not as good as blast in terms of the damage you can get out of it, but it's still, you know, just more damage. There's no real downside to having poison on your weapon outside of like maybe monsters that are immune to it like Garuga, but those are very few and far between. This one is the Triple Crown, which is 66 poison, but it has like 250 raw, white sharpness at best. Don't. Goldrathian is way better. Finally, Chameleos, it has 290 raw, which is quite high. 20 hits of purple and a decent bit of white. This one reminds me a lot of the Molten T-Rex Gunlances. They are pretty close. This one has 10 more raw, but it doesn't have the affinity, so the EFR is probably very close. This one does have poison, so it might outdamage it. The sharpness is very similar as well. I'd say these two can stand in best overall. Goldrathian is also decent at 270 raw. Again, I don't really think poison has a right matchup to use it on. It's just damage. It's not as good as blast though. Maybe we would need another tier in between these two to put all these like yeah, they have good raw, they have poison or blast, which is even more damage every once in a while, but there are like way better higher raw weapons as well. I don't know. Well, we'll keep this tier like this, I think. Tamarad's Edition, I don't think I have to tell you why this one is across the best overall. 5 rolls and you get a free sharpen effect. If you know something about Monster Hunter, you know that keeping your sharpness up is essentially the greatest DPS boost you can have if you can stay at purple. And this weapon is also blessed because it doesn't need sharpness +1. It gets more purple than every other Serageos weapon due to being a Gunlance which chews through sharpness. So you get like 30 hits of purple, which you can replenish after 5 rolls. I think it replenishes 10 hits every 5 rolls. 280 true raw, which is a lot for 15% affinity too, so it's very close in damage to the Molten T-Rex, except, you know, you get to keep up purple, you don't need sharpness +1. This is probably the best Gunlance in the game, low-key. It's long level 5 shelling, so you even get the best Wyvern's Fire in the game. Not that it's very good to go for Wyvern's Fire usually, because if you don't get a stagger on the monster, you can get punished really easily, but you know, it's there. So yeah, if we're gonna order this, this is the best overall Gunlance in the game, hands down. I don't think none of these tiers are ordered though, just the top one, I guess. Dalamadur Gunlance. Well, I think this one has very good raw for the affinity that it gets. It has some negative affinity, but it's not that bad. There it is, 310 raw at -10% affinity. Unfortunately, it's only stacked at white sharpness. It does have 3 slots, so you can potentially get rid of the -10% affinity with just another triple slot, so you can get 5 and 5 expert. But the fact it's stuck at white sharpness, I don't think makes it very compelling to go for. Purple is a huge damage boost in this game compared to white. It's not like in GU or World where they nerfed purple even more. This game it's a 45% damage bonus and white is a 32% damage bonus. So having purple and managing to like have a decent bit of hits to use it on is pretty important. I guess this one doesn't really have that much purple, it's like 20 hits, but again, you'll be using Razor Sharp, you can make those double. And your only worry is then is the shelling, which consumes more sharpness. Overall, 4U is a game that doesn't incentivize shelling that much. But yeah, all that's left is the... I think this is just the only Paralysis Gunlance in the game, yeah, that doesn't need Awaken. We have the Tiger Stripe Gunlance, which is, I'd say it has niche, but yeah, it's overall pretty meh. Dalamadur, I'd say the niche is I want to have big raw on white. Actually, you know, good in the right matchups is kind of dedicated to the elemental Gunlances that really stick out, because, you know, the element is the matchup dependent part. I don't know where to put this, like mid tier. Like, yeah, they are good, but you know, Tamarod has purple, it has higher, it has stupid raw, it has positive affinity, it gets auto sharpen. So I probably should just, yeah, add a new tier. And the best overall tier is just gonna be Tamarod, and everything else is gonna be down here. I feel like this is fair. So let me just fix the colors. And we'll put this in good raw options, I guess. Okay, so Tiger Stripe, it's basically the only paralysis gunlance that's usable, but it's not very good. It has 10 hits of purple, which is next to nothing. 260 raw, which is low, 25 para, which is low, normal 4 shelling, which is not as high as it could be. Just, not very good. Finally, Violet Buster, I guess it's also in this tier, because like 270 raw, yeah, that's quite high for Gunlances. It has 10 hits of purple, but after that, normal 4 and nothing else. It doesn't even get anything on Awaken, so even if you don't use it. Even if you'd use it, this would get nothing out of it. It does have 60 defense, but defense is hardly anything that I would care about on a weapon. And I'd say that's basically it. I guess we're gonna be fixing the colors to be the correct rating now, but aside from that, I feel pretty happy with this tier list. Stuck at high rank, I guess we'll just make it gray because it's bad and boring. I don't know if this has a niche, but overall my category has like the right to exist. Because also you could say, well, I don't know if these are completely outclassed, because like they are the sleep Gunlances, I guess the paralysis Gunlance, I guess there are niches for them. This one is the stupid fire, this one is the frenzied affinity thing. This one is a dragon Gunlance that's more on the raw side, so you can just, you know, go for a raw Gunlance. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say I'm happy with this. So, overall, this is the way the Gunlances are kind of balanced in for you. It's kind of insane how good a lot of Sergio's weapons are in this game. They're just unquestionably the best ones in their category. The same goes for like bow. Sergio's bow is absolutely absurd in how much better it is than every other bow in the game. And I'd say other weapons also have this problem of Sergio's just being way too dominant. There are classes where Sergio struggles, though at least like Sword and Shield and Dual Blades, you'll never see people run Sergio's weapons, because why would you? You chew through sharpness so much, the auto sharpen doesn't help, and they don't have element. But for the more raw-centric weapons, and like generally weapons that really want to keep their sharpness up and have struggled doing so, and need all the help they can get, like Gunlance, which basically has to run razor sharp, Sergio's is a godsend. So yeah, you can find the link to this tier list in the description if you want to take a crack at it, and that's gonna be TMB signing out. Goodbye everyone.